When I first heard about the hidden Inca gold, I was intrigued but skeptical. I'm an archaeologist, after all, not a treasure hunter. But the legends of Peru's lost riches and the promise of uncovering ancient history were too tempting to resist. My colleague, Miguel, had been researching this for years, and his enthusiasm was infectious. Together with our guide, Carlos, we set off into the Peruvian jungle, determined to uncover the secrets of the ancient civilization. Our journey began in the vibrant city of Cusco. From there, we trekked deep into the dense Amazon rainforest, guided by Carlos, who claimed to know the location of a hidden Inca temple. The trek was grueling, the air humid and thick with the scent of earth and vegetation. As we ventured further, the jungle seemed to close in around us, the canopy blocking out most of the sunlight. After days of relentless hiking, we finally reached the outskirts of the fabled temple. The structure was hidden beneath layers of vines and moss, almost completely reclaimed by nature. It was an incredible sight, the stone walls adorned with intricate carvings and symbols. "We're here," Carlos said, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. Miguel and I exchanged a look, our anticipation growing. We set up camp nearby and decided to rest before exploring the temple in the morning. That night, the jungle was alive with sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing, and something else, a low, eerie hum that sent chills down my spine. The next day, we began our exploration. The entrance to the temple was narrow, barely wide enough for us to squeeze through. Inside, the air was cool and musty. The walls were covered in more carvings, depicting scenes of daily life, rituals, and, ominously, sacrifices. As we ventured deeper, the narrow passageway opened into a vast chamber. In the center stood a golden statue of an Inca warrior, glistening in the faint light of our flashlights. Surrounding the statue were piles of gold artifacts, jewelry, figurines, and coins. It was a treasure trove hidden for centuries. "This is it!" Miguel exclaimed, his eyes wide with amazement. "We've found it." Carlos, however, looked uneasy. "We should be careful," he warned. "The spirits of the ancients protect this place." We dismissed his concerns as superstition and began cataloging the artifacts. Hours passed as we meticulously documented our findings, the thrill of discovery overshadowing any lingering fears. As night fell, we returned to our camp, exhausted but exhilarated. We sat around the fire discussing our plans to transport the artifacts back to civilization. Suddenly, the jungle fell silent. The usual cacophony of sounds ceased, replaced by an oppressive stillness. "What's happening?" Miguel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Carlos looked around nervously. "The spirits are angry," he said. "We've disturbed their resting place." Before we could respond, a chilling wind swept through the camp, extinguishing our fire. The temperature dropped sharply, and an unnatural darkness enveloped us. Out of the shadows, figures began to emerge, ghostly apparitions of Inca warriors, their faces twisted in anger. "We need to leave now!" Carlos shouted, his voice trembling with fear. We grabbed our gear and ran towards the temple, hoping to find shelter inside. As we entered, the apparitions followed, their ghostly forms flickering in the dim light. The air grew colder, and a sense of dread filled the chamber. "We need to return the gold," Carlos said, his voice urgent. "It's the only way to appease the spirits." Reluctantly, we placed the artifacts back around the golden statue. The apparitions watched silently, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. For a moment, the air grew still, and I thought we had succeeded. But then, a deafening roar echoed through the chamber, and the ground beneath us began to shake. The walls of the temple trembled, and stones fell from the ceiling. We scrambled to escape, but the apparitions blocked our path, their ghostly hands reaching out to grab us. Panic set in as we fought to free ourselves from their grasp. Miguel, in his desperation, grabbed a gold coin from the floor and threw it at the apparitions. "Take it! Leave us alone!" he shouted. The coin passed through the ghostly forms, and their anger seemed to intensify. One of the apparitions lunged at Miguel, its hand passing through his chest. Miguel screamed in agony, his face contorted in pain. "Help him!" I shouted to Carlos, but he was already pulling Miguel towards the entrance. We burst out of the temple, the apparitions close behind. The jungle was alive with an unnatural light, the spirits illuminating the darkness. We ran blindly, the sense of dread driving us forward. After what felt like hours, we emerged into a clearing. The apparitions stopped at the edge, their ghostly forms fading into the shadows. The air grew warm again, and the oppressive feeling lifted. We collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Miguel was pale and trembling, his hand clutching his chest. What was that?" he asked, his voice weak. Carlos looked at us, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and sorrow. "The curse of the Inca gold," he said. "The spirits of the ancients protect their sacred sites. We should never have disturbed their resting place." We rested for a while, regaining our strength. The journey back to civilization was a blur, the events of that night replaying in our minds. When we finally returned to Cusco, we agreed never to speak of what happened. The artifacts remained in the temple, hidden away from the world. But the memory of that night haunted us. The apparitions, the sense of dread, and the screams of the spirits. These were things we could never forget. The legend of the Inca gold was real, and the curse that protected it was more terrifying than any treasure we could have found. Years later, I still think about that expedition. The thrill of discovery had been overshadowed by the terror we experienced. The jungle, with its secrets and spirits, had claimed a part of our souls, and the Inca gold remained hidden, protected by the vengeful spirits of an ancient civilization.